Do you ever wonder why the U.S. has such a strong relationship with Israel, a relationship that President Obama himself has referred to as, quote, an unbreakable bond? One of the reasons the connection between these two countries is so close might be because of a powerful lobbying effort. AIPAC, or the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, is self-described as the most important organization affecting the U.S.'s relationship with Israel. The lobby has tens of thousands of members, and its annual policy conference is one of Washington's largest gathering of lawmakers, exceeded only by the State of the Union address, which is why Republican Senator Chuck Hagel in 2006 drew such heavy criticism over his views on the lobby's influence. He said, quote, "The political reality is that the Jewish lobby intimidates a lot of people up here. I'm a United States senator. I'm not an Israeli senator." Now that Hagel has been tapped for a spot as defense secretary, the mainstream media has been very quick to pick up on those past criticisms. But why has the questioning of this lobby become so taboo? To talk about this unbreakable bond and what it all means for U.S. foreign policy, I'm joined by Mark Bruzonsky, publisher of MiddleEast.org.
Hello,
Thank you so much for coming on, Mark.
Thank you.
So obviously Hagel's comments blew up in the mainstream media, not surprising at all. First of all, why is it so taboo to admit that this lobby has influence? And secondly, why is it so taboo to say that first and foremost, if you're a public servant, that your allegiance is for this country instead of Israel?
You know, the idea that mentioning the Israeli lobby, the Jewish lobby, I've called it the Israeli Jewish lobby in print for a long time. For those of us that have followed this for decades, we're looking and we're kind of laughing. Everybody knows there's this powerful lobby, just like everybody knows there's global warming. But there are certain things you can't really deal with in Washington. They're third rails, they're taboo subjects. It's not the mention of them, that's not the problem. It's the standing up to them. It's not letting them always dominate. It's voting against them. It's speaking against them. Journalists are ostracized. Presidents are ostracized. Remember what was President Carter, how he had to pull back when they were insisting on American policies being what they wanted and not what President Carter wanted. Think to the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. Bill Fulbright was pushed out of town. Chuck Percy was pushed out of town. So there's a long history to this. Hagel's problem is not that he mentioned the subject. Hagel's problem is that he occasionally stood up to them.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate, really, that this is the situation. But you know, when Hagel was a senator, he signed an aid package, $40 billion worth of aid to Israel. At the same time, Israel was violating international law. I mean, it seemed pretty pro-Israel to me. What really stipulates not being pro-Israel enough?
Look, let's just call it straight. I've been in Washington a long time. My first job when I first came here right out of grad school was to represent the World Jewish Congress. But it wasn't today's World Jewish Congress. It was the World Jewish Congress of the Internationalists, of Dr. Nachum Goldman. So I've been involved in this for a long time. They rely on intimidation. They rely on blackmail. They rely on letting people know that if you cross them, your career's in jeopardy. They do it with journalists, they do it with politicians, and they've been extremely successful because it's not just AIPAC. AIPAC is just the tip. That's just the public. You've got the President's Conference of major American Jewish organizations. You've got the American Jewish Congress, the American Jewish Committee. You've got Commentary Magazine. You've got two think tanks, one with the Republicans and the hardliners, the Near East Institute, the other, the Saban Institute, with the Democrats. It's a whole range of interlocking and interworking organizations. But where did it start from? It started from the Holocaust. It started from Jewish impotence in the 30s and 40s, and what happened to the Jewish people in Europe, and then the fight in the 40s over whether or not the U.S. would support the creation of a Jewish state. Everybody's forgotten the biggest person in foreign policy, General Marshall, opposed it. He even told President Truman that if you, President Truman, support the creation of a Jewish state, it will be unending war in the Middle East, it will be against American interests, and I, your Secretary of State, am going to resign. He threatened to resign over this.
Wow.
So this fight's been going on for a long time.
But how did it evolve to become so powerful and strong? People tell me all the time the Jewish lobby is really the ones running the show in Washington. How much, can you give us a sense on how much influence they really wield on Washington politics and actual policies that are implemented?
A lot of people will find this hard to believe. But to answer your question honestly, as I've come to experience it, when it comes to matters relating to Israel, matters relating to the Middle East, their influence is almost total. They have such ways of manipulating the press and politicians and of forcing people, and they've got many fallback positions. Sometimes it appears they don't get their first goal, but they've got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other goals that are all acceptable to them. And it's not just American Jews, by the way. CUFI, the Christians United for Israel, which AIPAC helped organize 7 years ago, is an extremely powerful force in this country. And their convention is even larger than AIPAC's convention when they hold it at the Washington Convention Center these years.
Well, you just reminded me of Philip Zelikow in 2004 when he was speaking to AIPAC, former foreign intelligence advisor, of course, under Bush, who said, "Why would Iraq attack America or use nuclear weapons against us?" I'll tell you what I think the real threat is, and actually has been since 1990. It's the threat to Israel. So here we have Zelikow, admitting, I mean, this is outrageous. I mean, how much of our foreign policy is dictated by just protecting Israel? How much of the Middle Eastern wars, these perpetual wars, are to protect Israel instead of this country?
It's hard for foreigners to understand how can the great superpower of the United States be pushed around by the little country of Israel. But it has to do with Jewish history. It has to do with Jewish influence. Both of the parties are very heavy with Jewish Zionist supporters. Politicians have learned over the years, if they cross AIPAC, AIPAC doesn't forget. Their life in Washington is going to be much more difficult. So think back to the book, The Israel Lobby by Walton Mearsheimer. You'll find a passage in there where they say, and these are 2 of our best political scientists, that had it not been for the influence of the Israeli lobby and AIPAC, they, in their judgment, don't believe the Iraq invasion would have taken place. That's how powerful this lobby is. But we're not dealing with the past, we're dealing with the present and the future. This is about Iran, this is about Hezbollah, this is about Hamas, this is about Palestinian state. What's really going on is a battle for control of the region, and the Israelis know they've got the Americans on their side, and anybody who threatens that is going to be intimidated and pushed out of Washington. Sharon, about 10 years ago, he was in a cabinet meeting with Peres, and Peres said something about we have to be careful, because the Americans, they're kind of onto us, and they know we're pushing them around, and they have their own national interests. And Sharon said, "Don't worry about that. I can take care of the Americans. We have our agents there. Okay. So you, Peres, don't worry about that."
I'd never really seen a head of state making the circuit rounds on corporate media in America, kind of offering his pledge for a presidential candidate, which was what Netanyahu was doing for Romney. So I thought that was really fascinating that here we have a foreign leader kind of pleading to the U.S., this is my opinion of who you should vote for. Very odd.
Let's remember how Obama was forced to genuflect, which is what's going to happen to Hagel. Hagel may have his views, but after they get through with these hearings, they're going to turn the hearings into a propaganda fest for them, because they're going to force Hagel to mouth all of their slogans and all of their positions. Of course, he doesn't really believe them. And of course, the president doesn't really want to be pushed in this direction. But in a sense, they're more powerful than these temporary politicians. They've been here for 40 or 50 years. Obama made in June of 2008, at a critical time when people were deciding between Hillary and Obama. He had a private meeting in a hotel right here in Washington with none other than the board of directors of AIPAC. That day, 3 hours after the meeting ended, a man by the name of Raham Emanuel gave a press conference because Raham had taken Obama to the meeting with AIPAC. And it was on that day, with AIPAC's okay, that Raham switched his allegiance from the Clintons to Obama. That was, for those of us who follow these things intensely, that was the day we knew that AIPAC and the Israeli lobby had decided to back Obama.
Unbelievable secret wheelings and dealings, but not so secret, actually, as you look deeper, Mark. And, unfortunately, our tight allegiance with Israel is debilitating peace in the Middle East, really inhibiting a lot of progress there as we continue to align ourselves with a country that practices lawlessness, apartheid, and many other things. It is tragic, and hopefully your work and other people speaking out and standing up to the lobby will definitely be the first step. Mark Bruzonsky, publisher, MiddleEast.org, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.